So in summary, there's a commandment that we unify Hashem's name, and you're going to hear that referred to or translated that way in a lot of Jewish literature. And I think it's not the best way to translate the concept, even though literally that's what it says in Hebrew. If you look at it in Hebrew, liyahed shemo. But as we see here explained, as we covered last week, when anyone refers to unifying Hashem's name or unifying God, that is supposed to be understood in the sense of not that God himself is not already one, but rather to unify him in the world, in our actions, and in the minds of other people, so that our actions reflect the fact that we serve one master, one Lord, as opposed to serving multiple lords, right? If our actions are inconsistent, then it's as if you serve multiple lords. And also to instruct other people and to remind ourselves that Hashem is one. So even though we see various different types of occurrences in the world, sometimes we experience judgment, sometimes we perceive compassion, sometimes it rains, sometimes the sun shines. So we shouldn't imagine that because there are variances in our experiences, that this is reflective of multiple gods. But rather, we should recognize that despite all of these variations and pluralities, that there's only one ultimate power and authority behind it all. So that's the idea of unifying his name. We're unifying him in our minds and in the minds of others. And this is also called Malchut, or Kablat Malchut Shamayim, to accept the kingdom of heaven. Because together with recognizing his unity, that's basically meaningless unless it's together with accepting and embracing God's lordship, his kingship over us. That was last week. All right, who would like to read the first paragraph? Any volunteers to read the first paragraph?
I can.
Okay, b'chavod. Go ahead.
The third mitzvah is that we are commanded to love God, exalted be He, i.e., to meditate upon and closely examine His mitzvot, His commandments, and His works, in order to understand Him, and through this understanding to achieve a feeling of ecstasy. This is the goal of the commandment to love God.
Wonderful. Anybody have any questions about that so far? All right. Second paragraph. I'm going to call on, well, I don't know if Mr. Andres is busy. Boker tov, Ahya Yakar.
בוקר טוב, אחי.
אתה עסוק?
כן, קצת, אבל אני רוצה לקרוא.
כן, יופי, בכבוד.
Okay. We can see the meditation is in the way to create this feeling of love free from the statement, you shall love God your God. Can I now know how to love God? The Torah therefore says, and these words which I command you today shall be upon your heart, i.e., that through this meditation about his commandments, you will understand the nature of the one who spoke, and thereby brought the world into being.
Excellent. And the term that's usually translated as meditation from Hebrew, well, there's a few of them, but they basically mean the opposite of what is popularly thought of as meditation in the Western world, and I guess the Far East. So I don't know about you guys, but at least in my experience growing up in the US, the term meditation usually kind of refers to sort of emptying your mind of all things and just repeating a certain mantra that may not even necessarily have any meaning. In halakha, the concept of meditation is related to the idea of repeating something, some concept, but it doesn't have to be the same exact concept or same word again and again and again. Because the Torah, you have 613 mitzvot, and we're commanded to meditate on all of them. But furthermore, and most importantly, meditation in serving God is not an emptying of your mind of all thoughts, but rather it's a filling of our minds with the mitzvot, with the express will of God. It's important to make that distinction. Okay, let's put it down to here. All right, Mr. Robert, would you like to read the highlighted portion? Boker Tov, Rav Sanders.
Boker Tov, good morning.
Oh, I was muted.
I'm back on mute.
I was double muted. I was sitting there reading away.
Oh, no. All right, b'chavod. Go right ahead, b'chavod.
For this it is clear that meditation will lead to understanding, and then a feeling of enjoyment and love will follow automatically, since the second verse explains the way to reach the goal of the previous verse. Our sages also said that this mitzvah includes calling out to all mankind to serve Hashem, exalted to be He, and to believe in Him.
I don't know about you guys, but did I just hear what I think I heard? What did you guys hear? Did anything stand out there that sounds unusual coming from Jewish literature?
Yeah, it's something that I give a lot of thought to. Our sages also said that this mitzvah includes calling out to all mankind to serve God, exalted be He, and to believe in Him.
Excellent. And just as a side note, what is the definition of one of the Taryag mitzvot? We learned a list of principles before we started the list of the Taryag mitzvot. And for those who don't yet know, please have a pen and paper next to you, or pencil, whatever, preferably a sticky pad so you can stick your notes on your fridge and look at them for the rest of the week till next week. So if you don't know, Taryag is a Hebrew acronym that means 613. It's because Hebrew letters sort of function as Roman numerals in a similar way as Roman numerals. So that means that you can actually create words with numbers. And that's sort of how the whole concept of gematria, if you have heard of that, arises. So who can tell us what makes the Taryag mitzvot, what makes the 613 mitzvot different from other mitzvot? Because the Torah does actually include more than just 613. What is special about the 613? How are they different from other mitzvot?
I believe that one of the criteria is that they have to be more than just for one individual for one time. That they are performative beyond one context. I forget how.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And specifically that they are for all generations. They're not just for one generation or a few generations. The 613 mitzvot are for all generations, even including those in the 613 mitzvot that for whatever reason we feasibly, like practically speaking, cannot do right now. They're still in force, meaning if you have the ability to do it right now, you're obligated to do it in every generation. So, for example, all of the mitzvot concerning the temple, Some might think, oh, those don't apply right now. They absolutely do. They absolutely apply right now. It's simply that we are exempt from the punishment of not doing them right now because it is not practically within the ability of the average person to do them right now. But they're still enforced, meaning if you could, you should. And if you can't, we should do what we can to get to the point that we're able to do them again. The same thing goes for Amalek. Amalek, that we should destroy Amalek, which was a major foe of ancient Israel. So one of the 613 mitzvot is to destroy Amalek. So we may say, Amalek, where is Amalek? You know, because we don't know who they are or where they are, perhaps they don't exist anymore, then this mitzvah no longer applies. This mitzvah applies even though we don't know who Amalek is or whether they still exist. And the sages actually taught that they no longer exist, just by the way. Although a future Beit Din Gadol, a future great Sanhedrin, could change their mind about that. But the point is that if Amalek or anything deemed equivalent to Amalek were to be encountered by us in any generation, then that law still applies. So how does that apply to what we just read here? Considering that this is in the 613 mitzvot. This is one of the 613 mitzvot. Why is that relevant? Especially if speaking to other observant groups.
Because it should, I mean, it's a day Eretha, it should take priority over anything else in the halakha that develops.
Anything rabbinic, absolutely. Anything concerning like a minhag, a custom that would be perceived as contradicting this, then absolutely. If it's deoraita, if it derives from the express word of God, then this overrides. Doesn't matter how much they cherish that custom. This is overriding it. And because it's one of the 613 mitzvot, it is not something that is unique to the Messianic era. And that's what I was trying to get at. Although what you said is absolutely true. Many will say that, yes, we should do this, but this is for the Messianic era. Well, then it would not be in the list of the 613 mitzvot. The 613 mitzvot are not laws, they're not commandments only for the Messianic era. They're for all generations. It's a very, very significant thing to point out. Yalla, bo namshich. Let's continue. Everybody say, bo'u namshich. Bo'u namshich.
Bo'u namshich.
That means let's continue. All right. Peter, would you like to read the highlighted section?
Sure. This is because when you love a person, for example, you praise him and call out to others to draw close to him. So too, if you truly love God, through your understanding and realization of his true existence, you will certainly spread his true knowledge, that you know to the ignorant and to the foolish.
We have a new victim. I think everybody has already been a victim so far. Heather, back to you.
We see that this mitzvah includes spreading love for God to others from the Shifari. Sifri. You shall love God, i.e., make him beloved among the creatures, as your father Abraham did. As it is written, the souls that he made are in Haram.
Okay, and this is most likely just a midrash, but it's still relevant because it's telling us that this is what Hazal, our sages of blessed memory, considered such an important teaching that they made what's called an asmachta, a biblical correlation to a concept. So there's a concept, many things. This is important to remember when learning rabbinic literature. And it's also something that gets lost in the minds of a lot of Jews from birth who grew up Torah observant. The words of our sages are full of all sorts of biblical references that are easy for non-Jews to make fun of, to say, this is obviously not what they're talking about in the text. So why are they equating this verse with this teaching? So this is what I'm saying at this moment is not a de facto explanation to try to justify their words, but rather what our sages in rabbinic literature themselves understood what they were doing, because they referred to it in certain places and as being an asmachta meaning basically a correlation. You're juxtaposing a certain concept that one already holds dear, which you can say is sort of a assumption, but the point is that it's something that they already hold dear, and they're juxtaposing it to something in the biblical text without fooling themselves to think that this is the plain meaning of the text. So when they do this, depending on the context of their words, they're not fooling themselves into thinking that this is the plain meaning of the text, but rather they're using it as a device, a literary device, if you will, to help the Jewish people recall certain teachings in addition to the plain meaning of the text. So there is a plain meaning of the text of the Bible that teaches we should spread Hashem's love, spread the love of God around the world. But connecting it to this verse specifically may not necessarily be the plain meaning of the text here, but they are attaching an extra meaning to it to help facilitate recall of the concept, extra recall, when we're reading the Bible. So that's an important concept to remember. That's called asmachta, if you want to write it down. Asmachta. Okay. Who can tell us what sifri is?
I believe that's the halakhic midrashic commentary on Vayikra.
Right. And what does that mean? How's that different from other midrash?
Because it's from the Tanaim.
Who are the Tanaim?
They were the last generation of the Sanhedrin, and it is a halakhic midrash. So it is confirming the halakha from the Humash.
Right. So it's going, even though it's midrashic in the sense that it's a sort of exegesis of the text that goes along, like it's following the concepts of the biblical text. However, it's not in the style of later midrash, which tends to delve into less practical matters. So as opposed to that, the Sifri and other similar texts, such as Mechilta and Sifra, they are not going on tangents, delving into non-legal matters, but they're sticking to what is the word? Sticking to the elaboration of how you actually live out the mitzvot. But they're digging into the text doing so. So it's important to remember that that's substantially different from later midrash, or the style of later midrash. Mr. Roberts, Ata Itano, you with us?
Yeah.
Bachavod.
Let's see here. The meaning of this Sifri, Abraham, as a result of his deep understanding of God, acquired love for God, as the verse testifies, Abraham who loved me. This powerful love therefore caused him to call out to all mankind to believe in God, so too you shall love him to the extent that you draw others to him.
All right. These cool mitzvot. So this is cause and effect, and it's similar to a concept that that is very well known among serious Christians, and sadly is not so well known among Jews, but it should be. And that's the idea of fruit of the Spirit, so to speak. The idea that there is a distinction between loving God, trusting God, and even keeping his commandments. All these things, they are distinct from actually doing God's commandments, yet they are intrinsically tied together, and one naturally leads to the other. So that if there is not one, then there is not going to be the other. So they're distinct, but inseparable. And I mentioned keep. Anybody have any comments or thoughts about why I mentioned keeping God's commandments as preceding doing his commandments?
That'd be guard.
Correct. Yep. Lishmor, shomer. Why would I be pointing out keeping as being distinct from doing?
I think what Robert was hinting at there is shomereth versus asa, like the guard.
Typically, when people talk about keeping the mitzvot, keeping God's commands, keeping the Sabbath, they're usually using the term keep in a way that is synonymous with doing, like literally synonymous, one and the same. Would you guys agree with that?
That's what I've heard most of the time, but
Yeah, in all groups, Jewish or Christian.
I've learned there is a difference to me.
There is a difference. Do any of you have any idea what the difference is? It's not necessarily go ahead.
Would it be to study, to meditate on them?
I would say that's closer to the idea.
Mm-hmm.
The number one
pass them on.
The number one indication that I received that they are distinct is the fact that there are many places in the Torah where doing and keeping are distinguished from each other. There are several places where it says lishmor mitzvotai, to keep my commandments, la'asotam, to do them. And I'm paraphrasing because there could be different conjugations, but there are many places where it says you should keep my commandments to do them. Well, if these two words are synonymous, then that's just completely redundant.
Yeah, because if you don't meditate and study them, you can't do them.
Correct. And the meditating and the studying, it presupposes a valuing of them, that you value them, right? So if you guard something, you only guard what you care about, right?
Yeah.
I mean, typically, generally speaking. So to guard Hashem's commandments, you can't keep his commandments until you've already guarded them. And guarding them is, I would say, is synonymous with Qablat Malchut Shamayim, accepting the yoke of the kingdom of heaven. That guarding God's commandments is one and the same as embracing his commandments internally. So it's not that you know each and every mitzvah. It's not that you do each and every mitzvah perfectly, but rather that you've accepted and embraced, and you hold dear the mitzvot. So you've internalized them in your heart. And as a result of that, as an outgrowth of that, then you're going to do what you can to live it out. It's going to impact your actions.
The love of the kingdom causes you to do that.
Yes, exactly. And I think that's important because I have met many people who say, oh, I want to keep Shabbat, but I don't keep Shabbat. Or I want to keep kashrut, but I can't for various reasons. And they're not always simply excuses. It's very easy to just dismiss people as making excuses. And sometimes we do have excuses, but they're not always excuses. Sometimes people are in serious financial difficulties and they have to work on Shabbat because they haven't yet found an alternative way to make money. And if they don't work on Shabbat, they risk their families, losing shelter. They may not have food to eat. Not everybody is as fortunate as everyone else, especially people who live outside of the United States or Western countries. So it's important to know this difference so as to recognize when someone has that sincere will and desire to do the mitzvot, they're already keeping the mitzvot, even if they do not perfectly uphold them in their actions. If they want to do it and that's their goal and what they're trying to do within their ability, then they're already keeping the mitzvot. Would we say we don't keep the Torah just because we don't make sacrifices in the temple every day as a nation? Are we not keeping Passover just because we all of our lives have not made the Passover sacrifice? Does that mean we're not keeping Passover? Absolutely, we're still keeping Passover. It's just that we don't have it within our ability. It's not within our means currently for most people to actually do the sacrifice, but we're still keeping it because we cherish it and we want to do it when we're able. So if this is true for Passover and certain other commandments that we can't feasibly do, if this is true for the religious establishment, for the norms of the religious establishment, why is it suddenly not true for people who are, for whatever reason, outside of the religious establishment, or ostracized, specifically because it's not within their ability for doing certain things? Do you guys see what I'm trying to say here? Like, this sort of idea is applied in inconsistent ways. There's sort of a double standard. But if we would be consistent, then I would say that the tent of Abraham, so to speak, or the walls of Israel are greater than some would like to admit. Yes, sir. Rav Sanders, Makore, what's up?
A question. I understand that the halakhic priority of supporting a family is going to outweigh the Shabbat. Somebody asked me for like a responsa or some kind of a written material that addresses that question. Either something, even going back to like Shulchan Aruch or Mishneh Torah, that addresses that question about supporting a family, even to the point of having to break Shabbat.
Not possibly Shulchan Aruch, because I'm not as well acquainted with Shulchan Aruch as I am Mishneh Torah.
Okay.
It's possible. I honestly can't tell you with full confidence, but I can say that Shulchan Aruch generally follows the same outline as the Mishneh Torah, even though it adds a lot of customs and sometimes it diverges, but it's generally following the same. And I know that Mishneh Torah does not talk about this in detail, but it does give certain principles. It gives certain examples and principles. Not a lot, and not this specific example, but I can tell you a few off the top of my head. So one is that, and this is true for all of the mitzvot, and this is something stated explicitly in Mishneh Torah, so you could assume it's in Shulchan Aruch as well. That is that anytime a person is coerced for any reason, but they are coerced to violate a mitzvah, they are exempt from punishment. So the punishment is only when a person knowingly and intentionally violates a commandment, even though qualified authorities, someone who they know has authority and knowledge of the mitzvah, has warned them and told them that this is a violation. So that's a general principle for all of the mitzvot. And if they stop violating the mitzvah after the first warning, they're exempt. They're only culpable of the punishment if they continue to do the violation even after being warned twice by qualified authorities. So you really do have to be kind of intentionally trying to break Hashem's mitzvot. It's not just like a slip up or because something's coercing you. And also, there's an example given in Mishneh Torah of when a person, for whatever reason, they get confused about the days of the week, and they're not, at that moment, they're not within a community. So let's say they were in the middle of traveling, and for whatever reason, they got the days mixed up. So it says that they can work every day, but they should only work enough to survive. Right? And that doesn't mean like they necessarily have to know the precise second when they stop working, but they should only work to the extent that they need to work in order to survive, which means you can work on Shabbat in order to survive. It's a given. And then you also have the principle that is widely known of pikuach nefesh, which refers to how we break all the laws of Shabbat if necessary. And not that you can, but you should break all the laws, any of the laws of Shabbat, if necessary, in order to save a life. And I mean, the average person would recognize that living on the streets is a risk to your life. So halakha in general basically gives you principles, but it doesn't give you every single scenario. If it would do that, then the books would be potentially infinite in size. So we just get the principles, and it's the duty of the great Sanhedrin in the future and of lower courts in the meantime to guide us in how best to apply these principles in different scenarios. So the halakhic codes are not intended to be, cover every single situation. You guys still awake?
Yep, still here, definitely.
Yep.
All right. All right, let's move on to Mishneh Torah. All right, we're going to get back to our Aristotelian exposition on the transcendence of God. A little poke in the side.
I'm curious why you said Aristotelian. Are you poking fun of me, or is that
Yeah.
Okay? That's fine. I can take it. I have a lot to learn.
Okay, so as mentioned before, while we're reading this, and until toward the end of the class, we want to try to stay focused on the text, even if we don't agree with everything that the Rambam says. That doesn't mean you're going to hell, and even if you know you're not going to hell, it doesn't mean I think you're going to hell. And this is for everybody, not just those heretics of the Aristotelian faith. But yeah, we want to try to stay focused on the text, and more than likely, if anybody diverges and goes on a tangent, that'll be me. So please feel free to try to guide me back to the text. I know I can be long-winded. Last week, we spoke about what it means when Moses requested of Hashem to see his glory. And it says that Hashem showed him his back. Can someone remind us of a few of the significant facts regarding that experience that often get overlooked, or that you just remember learning last week, as the Rambam explained it here? Anybody recall? I realize it's sort of appearing on your screen in code form, but just off the top of your head. And if you don't recall, at this point, we'll just take anything. What are your thoughts on when Moses asked God to show him his glory, and then it said that Moses saw his back? Don't everybody speak up at once.
I was not here last week, so I can't say anything.
Oh, bummer. And also remember, you may be on mute. Sometimes that happens. You think you're talking and we can't hear you. Mr. Robert, you have any thoughts?
I know it wasn't physically.
All right.
Uh, hang on.
There's
Hold
something
on.
that indicates that to us, though.
Yeah.
Something that indicates to us that it wasn't physical in the text itself that gets lost in translation.
I'm just trying to remember.
Okay. Well, let's begin. And again, we're saying, as the Rambam's explaining this, there can be other explanations. Okay. So the Rambam explains that when Moses asks to see that Hashem would show Moses his glory, that there the term kavod is referring to the greatness of God as he truly is, not just God's greatness as we perceive at one given time or from our limited perspective, but to know God's greatness as it truly is. And Hashem answered, no man can see my face and live. But then God proceeded to say, you will see my back, but my face you will not see. So one of the ways we know that he didn't see a literal back, and likely by inference, that would likewise mean that he wasn't asking to see a literal face, is because the word for back is not the normal Hebrew word for back, for a physical, biological back, but it's literally my behinds, and it's plural. It doesn't have to be plural. So it's behind instead of it's the word ahoroi. Ahora is the singular, ahora. Ahora means behind, and this is plural because the oi ending. So when you see a word in Hebrew ending with a patah or a kamatz and a yud, that's typically first person possessive, like my many of something that are mine. And in addition, as we said, this is ahora, which is behind, as opposed to gav, which is going to be the typical word for a physical, biological back. So what would it mean that you won't see my face, but you can see my behinds? And forgive me for the way that sounds in English. It's really not on purpose, but it's plural, and I'm trying to convey what it's literally saying in Hebrew. So what could that mean with English idioms aside?
I mean, it almost like suggests like the ripples, the after effect.
Yes, exactly. The after effect. The indications of his existence. So the Rambam explains that what God was saying was, you cannot know the you can't know the fullness of the reality of myself, of God, as I truly am. But you will be able to, you, Moses, will be able to perceive my backs, or that which follows me. And there's more than one way to translate it. You don't have to only translate it as back. The term is used not just here, but in several places, not referring to backs, but referring to other things. Like the word for after or following, they're all the same root here. So ahare means coming after. Ahor means behind something, not even like the physical behind of your body, but just behind something. So if I want to say that there's someone standing behind me, I could say he is ahorai. It's literally the same word. Same word. Yes, sir. I see Robert raised his hand. I didn't even know that was possible.
A rough analogy would be Moses couldn't see the rock hit the water, but he saw the after effect. of the ripples of the
Yes.
effect.
Yes. So what is the thing that's unique here is that in the understanding of the Rambam, what God is telling Moses is not exactly completely innovative for Moses. Anyone who's alive has seen the after effects of God's existence. I mean, if you perceive anything, you're perceiving a consequence of God's existence. So then what's so special about this, right? Like, what's special about it? So the Rambam explains that what God is telling Moses here is different from what our experience is, and that God is insinuating that although Moses cannot perceive the fullness of God's reality as it truly is, which is literally impossible, dead or alive. Some people like to say, oh, you can't do it while you're alive, but you can do it when you're dead. It's both are impossible. Unless you are God, you will never perceive the fullness of God. That includes his knowledge, his omnipotence. You have to be God to know that as it truly is. And we all perceive God through the consequences, the after effects of his existence, which is creation. So what's unique here is that in the understanding of the Rambam, God is telling Moses that although you won't know me as I truly am, you can and you will know me, and you will know my greatness to the fullest extent possible through that which is a result of my existence. So not just the regular perception of creation as every human experiences, but you will know the totality of the fullness of creation. So it's not infinite, but from a regular human perspective, it's practically infinite. And I don't know how that experience would have been for Moses. I don't know if it's that he would, at the moment that he needs to know something, like the knowledge would just immediately come to him about anything, or if it's like constant and all at once, which is still, I'd say in layman's terms, would still be kind of quasi-divine, but not that Moses would literally be God in any way. But to have such a vast knowledge, even if it's limited, is still like kind of quasi-divine if you're talking about all knowledge. But that's basically what the Rambam is saying. And this ties into his concept that Moses was different from all other prophets. All other prophets, as God told us in the Torah, God reveals to them information through visions and dreams and with metaphors, riddles. Not so Moses, my servant. He's faithful in all my house. I speak to him mouth to mouth. Usually translated as face to face. So it seems to be in reference to some sort of instantaneous communication, which is like an open pathway for Moses that is not hindered by the need to have a vision or to figure out riddles. And yet there were for sure visions earlier in Moses's prophetic experience, but at this point and on, his level of prophecy was significantly different, so that you wouldn't have to wait for prophecy, but it would immediately be there. You have something in, somebody wrote in the comments, we don't, that's what you said earlier. We don't see the rock because we can't perceive it, or maybe we just didn't look fast enough. But in the case of God, we can't see it. And we don't understand it. We don't know what it looked like, but you can still see the effects of the object by the waves. And that's a great analogy. Sur Israel, Rock of Israel. Okay, Bo Nathil. Let's begin the Hebrew. Now for the heavy stuff. Who would like to be our first victim? Well, maybe second. We need somebody to read the highlighted portion. Going once, going twice. Rav Andres, אתה איתנו?
אני פה.
אתה שם? אני אוהב את
כן,
ההד,
אני פה.
אני אוהב את ההד שיש לך.
עוד פעם.
אתה
תודה, גם אני.
אתה נשמע כמו בת קול. You sound like a voice from heaven with that echo. Is there any way you could adjust it? Like earlier, actually, it sounded cool, but right now it sounds a little bit too muffled.
Too muffled. Okay. Let me see if I could get out of this room.
Let's get Mr. Peter to read. Oh, go ahead. That is better. Go ahead. Yalla. Yeah. You know what? I understand what's happening. It sounds like a Wi-Fi connection issue because you're breaking up in addition to being very muffled. So we're just going to get Rav. We're going to get Rav Peter to read this, and we'll try a little bit later if your audio is better.
Oh, okay. So sorry.
No, now I can hear you. Say a sentence. Let's just test it. Say something.
Okay. וכיוון שנתברר שאינו גוף וגוף וגוויה.
Beautiful. Ughwiya. All right. Let's translate. תתרגם, בבקשה. תתרגם.
וכיוון open with the וכיוון.
So this looks like the word for intention, kawana, to have intent or intention,
okay.
but that's not what it means here.
Okay.
This is one of several Hebrew words for since or because. There's for some reason there's a lot of Hebrew words for because, and this is one of them.
One of them, yeah, okay.
Right? So and since and because.
שנתברר that or so נתברר זה okay, let's break it down, right?
That's right.
Yeah, so shin is the preposition.
All right, shin's a prefix, so we can ignore that to try to figure out the basic meaning. Okay, what about this? Is this part of the basic meaning or some sort of a fix? Prefix.
Okay, no, that's also prefix. And then barar.
What does that sound like? I think
sounds
you know this.
Sounds like barar, like creating, right? Create.
Oh, that would be with an aleph and one resh.
barar.
אבל אתה מכיר את המילה ברור, לא?
No, baruch. And baruch for sure.
All right, so barur means clear. Barur. Barur. I have a question for everybody. What word is used, and this is going to be easy for people who've gone through Messianic communities or has a Christian background and started getting into Hebrew through that. What word is used in the book of Psalms where it says, kiss the son in most Christian translations?
Bar.
Bar. And what does it actually mean in Hebrew? Because bar does not mean son in Hebrew.
It means pure.
Yes. So this word is coming from that word. All right? Bar. So barur, this is not barur, but it's the same root. You can write down the word barur because it's pretty common. It's like the Spanish word claro. They use it a lot. So, so B, I would say B-E-R-U-R, barur, barur. It means clear, clear. Related to the word bar for pure. So barar. Since that, something clear. Now this neat means became. So and since that it became clear. Okay.
شئنو To us.
No, I didn't hear you.
To us.
So she again is the prefix that means that, like que in Spanish.
That to us.
Oh, so anytime you're gonna have a direct object, which is like saying something us, you will have this nu, but you're not gonna have this yud. You will never have this yud.
Okay.
So this is, I know you know this word.
Ain, there's none.
So this is ain, it is not, means this nun is not a suffix. It's part of the word. So, and since it became clear to us that not he, this is an older, usually you would see an O here in modern Hebrew. Guf u'ya.
Guf is body, right?
Guf is a body, and u'ya, it also means body, but the Rambam is making a distinction here, so he's neither like a human body nor any sort of body. It's not just that God is not a human body, but God is not any kind of form.
Any form, okay.
And when we say God is not a form, we're not saying that it's impossible for God to create some kind of a form that represents his unique presence in some place or at some time. But we're saying that the reality of God as he truly is not a body or a form. But there's nothing wrong with imagining that God can create a burning bush, for example, and then that burning bush speaks as if it's God, right? But we would be mistaken to think that God is a burning bush, right? So God can create forms that sort of signify a unique prophetic experience. But those forms that God creates, even if they speak as if they're God, they themselves are not God. The bush that Moses saw was not literally God, but it spoke as an agent of God. Right? It's same thing with angels. Idoki. Who would like to read? Mr. Peter, Tur Shalcha, your turn. Tur Shalcha.
Yithba'ar Shalo, Yero, Yero. Although Echad, Mima'oroth, Haguf.
Okie dokie. Whenever we see an ayin, we always want to break up the syllable, make a new syllable. So, for example, here, mime, because there's a dot in the mem, so it's a sound in Shava. Mime, ora. It's a sound in Shava because you have a holam here. And then ayin is going to be always a new syllable. So we need to hear a clear separation in the syllables. Anytime you see an ayin or an aleph that has a vowel. So mimma ur'uth, mimma ur'uth, mimma ur'uth. Can you hear the separation?
I can.
All right. Let's read it one more time. Watch out for those ayins.
Okay. Yithba'ar Shalo, Yero.
So not yero. If we say yero, then we're making the resh and the o the same syllable. Yero. Let me know if you understand or don't understand.
I hear you read that word.
Okay. So anytime we have a shava, and especially if there's an ayin after it, they are two
I see. I follow.
Utterly separate syllables. So if we read it like yero, which by the way is not your own innovation, that's how almost certainly the majority of English speaking religious Jews would read this. But anytime you have a shava or an ayin followed with another vowel, they're going to be completely separate syllables. So we should not hear them as if they're one syllable. So this is not one syllable, ro, rather it's ra, o, ra, o. Yer, this is one syllable, yer, and then the second, o. Yir'o. So there's a division between the two. And the
Yeah.
aleph is silent here because there's no vowel above or below it.
Mhm. Thank you. Very helpful. Thank you.
Yalla, עוד
Yer-
פעם.
Yir'o. Walo echad. Mima oroth.
ממאורעות. ממאורעות.
Wouldn't that be it's there's no dogation in the tav?
Did I say ot? That's
Yes.
just my modern Hebrew coming out. Yeah,
Sure.
it should be mima'er'oth. If you want to do that.
You pronounce the ayin, but you mispronounce the tav, which is a funny combination.
Yeah, but a lot of people pronounce ayin in modern Hebrew.
Yes. Okay.
There's a lot of people that they're usually older, but they do it. Go ahead.
Mima oroth haguf.
Okay, so anytime we see the shava under a letter, you want to imagine that like the next letter is a completely separate word. In meaning, it's the same word. It's part of the same word. But as far as pronunciation, they're not oroth, but oroth.
Okay, I'm gonna try that again. I see what you're saying, and it's very helpful. Mima or the ayin pronunciation makes it easier, I think, but I can't do that.
You don't need to pronounce the ayin perfectly to do this. Just break the syllable. So like we say uh-oh, if you say uh-oh, there's like a break between the two syllables, right?
Right.
So do it like that. Like mora mima ora, and then pause, oath.
Mima or oath.
That's it. That's it. You got it. It's important because it changes the meaning. It changes the meaning of the word. And part of the point of our lesson, it's not just to learn all of the halachot, but also to improve our Hebrew. So we're all gonna get challenged here, but it is gonna get easier. All right. Yalla bo'u netargem. Let's translate.
Yes, ba'ar. I'm struggling with that with the shoresh on that. Ba'ar would mean to. It's not the same bar as the previous one.
It's not, but they do have a similar meaning. So I suspect they might have a similar or the same etymological origin, but definitely it's not, as we have Hebrew today, they're not the same root.
Okay,
But
so
it does have a similar meaning.
he is pure. His purity. He is pure.
Or here it's like clarified.
He's
It's been
okay. He's
explained.
clarified. Okay. Yeth ba'ar, he is clarified. Shalo and does not. Or of him, the clarity of him. Yero, does appears. Walo achad.
All right, slowly.
Okay.
So if it's appearing, it's going to have an aleph where this ayin is.
Sure. Okay.
Right? There's no ayin in, but when we're not sure, that's what we got to go with. So yeah, ayin is not in the word for appearing. So this is the word erua. Erua is one of a few words for occurrence in Hebrew.
So
Erua.
the multiply in this case.
So yeah is like he, and then oh is him. So let's start from the beginning. Yeet is like it became. It is masculine, but it doesn't exist in Hebrew. So sometimes when it's a he in Hebrew, you might want to translate it as it, depending on the context. So it has become clarified. It's now been explained that doesn't, from the word erua, which means occurrence. So it has now been clarified that it does not occur to him. The O is the direct object. It's what's receiving the action. So it does not occur to him, referring to God. Wala ahad, and not even one. Mi, from, me'ora'oth, not even one from among various occurrences, haguf, of the body. So it has been clarified from what we already learned that not even nothing occurs, not even one of the occurrences of the human body happens to God or applies to God. So since it has become clarified that he is not a body nor any form, it is from this knowledge that we know that none of the occurrences of a body applies to God. Right, so that's what we've read so far. All right. Miss Whitley, welcome. Whitley, long time no see. Can you hear us? Make sure you're not on mute.
Okay, yes, I was on mute.
All right, everybody, I would like to introduce Miss Whitley. She's a good friend of mine. Miss Whitley, would you have the honor of reading this part? Don't worry about struggling because we're all struggling here.
Okay. Lo חיבור ולא פירוד.
Whitley. I was thinking, you said you haven't studied anything Hebrew for years, and you sounded so unconfident. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, but like
That was perfect.
I won't remember any of the translations of these except just
Sababa,
two
no
words
big deal.
I know.
No big deal.
All right, so
Go ahead.
no חיבור.
Hibur is related to the Hebrew word for friend, haver,
Okay.
but it's not a friend. So the popular Hebrew word for friend, haver, it's coming from a root word which means joined.
Okay.
So
So
not
is this the root word חיבור?
basically, it's the
Joined?
root meaning. Yeah. So neither joining in any kind of literal sense.
Why is it joining? I'm sorry, I won't remember any of like.
Yeah, don't try to
I don't remember
overanalyze
the
it.
tenses. Why is it join? Why is it ing?
I don't want us to get too deep into this
Okay.
because it's already
No
probably
problem.
too much for most people.
Okay, I understand. Okay.
I'm just giving the basic meaning.
Okay. All right. So no joining and no perud.
That's the opposite of joining.
Unjoining.
Yep, separation.
Separation.
Yeah.
Perud.
So
Okay.
for example, when we say that that Hashem, the God, transcends the world, that God is over all creation, he's not subject to time and space, we absolutely mean that. God is not subject to time and space, and God transcends the world. He's not literally in this world. But at the same time, and just as true, God is also not separate from this world in any literal, like physical sense. And it's not that God is literally in the world in a physical sense or literally outside of the universe in a physical sense. It's not that he's either of these. And it's also not that he doesn't exist, God forbid. Rather, these concepts don't even apply. They don't apply to the fundamental reality of who God is. So God is a true existence, but the whole concepts of location don't apply. So God is everywhere and God is nowhere at the same time. But what we mean by that is that God is nowhere in a localized physical sense, and God is everywhere, but he's everywhere, but not in a physical sense. Or an analogy, imperfect analogy, you could say that God is everywhere, sort of in the sense that some truth is true everywhere, even though it's not literally tangibly everywhere. Like 1 + 1 is 2. Doesn't matter where you go, 1 + 1 is always going to be 2. It's just a fundamental truth. It's a reality that's true everywhere, but it's not literally like if you take a microscope, you're not going to see it anywhere. You know what I'm saying? So that's what this is saying here. None of these concepts apply to God because God is not a body. Okay. Who would like to read next? Someone who hasn't read in a while. Miss Heather, you with us?
Yes, I am.
All right. You have the honor, please. Bechavod.
Velo makum
Makom.
makom velo madah
Mida.
midah.
All right. Let's translate this. Lo means not. Makom. Anybody know what makom means?
Means place.
Is it place?
Excellent. By the way, I highly encourage all of you to write down the location of this halakha. This is chapter 1, 13th halakha. It's the 13th halakha in the accurate manuscripts, which you can find on Machon Mamre and on the Chabad.com or org, whatever it is. On the Chabad website, you're going to find it in halakha 11. Their Mishneh Torah is based on problematic manuscripts. But you can find this halakha in that location. I want you guys to write it down. This is Yesodeh haTorah. It's the first book of the Mishneh Torah, chapter 1, 13th halakha, or 11th if it's on Chabad. And I want you guys to learn the words in this halakha. Doesn't need to be every single word, but I strongly encourage you to learn it. Because this halakha contains a lot. It's packed with some very common, basic Hebrew words. It has a lot of common Hebrew words. Most halachot will have one or two very common words, but also all sorts of weird conjugations that might be overwhelming. This one has a lot of simple forms of regular words, so it's very useful to learn to increase your vocabulary. Okay, I'm going to read the rest of it, and then we're going to move on to the next halakha. Wala aliyah. Right, so we learned that God is not a body nor form, and that none of the occurrences of bodies apply to God. If God is not a body, then nothing that occurs to a body applies to God. Neither joining, HI'UR, nor perud, separation, nor makom, location, nor midah, quantification or size. La aliyah, nor ascension, nor yerida, descent. So neither going up nor going down. Neither yamin, right, nor samol, left, nor panim, front, nor, and this also means face, by the way, nor ahur, behind. And remember, we just learned about ahuroi in Moses's experience with God. Nor yeshiva, neither sitting, nor amidah. Who can tell us what amidah means?
Standing.
Yeah, high five. Enu masui bazaman. Enu masui bazaman. Enu. He is not. Masui, found. Bazaman, in time. Ad. Sheyihiye la rashith. Such that literally means until, but it's used here in the sense of such that he would be, or such that there would be unto him rashith, a beginning. Wa aharith, or an end. Uminyan, shanim, or a number of years. So, for example, when we say that Hashem is Atiq Yamin, that he is ancient of days, we're not saying that he has any number of days. It's just an expression. Enu mishtaneh. He does not mishtaneh, change. She'en la davar sheyigrom la shinui. For there is nothing which is capable of causing him change, because he's not a body. Idoki. Halacha. By the way, Whitley, so I don't know if you caught it before, but we are starting Mishneh Torah from the first book. So this is the first chapter of the first book of Mishneh Torah, where we are covering Yesodeh Yesodot, HaChamah HaChamot, the foundation of foundations and the wisdom of all wisdoms, which is the most foundational aspect of Judaism. It's recognition of the highest authority and the rock and foundation, rock figuratively, of course, foundation of all existence, the bedrock reality. And so we're learning that he is incomparable and incomparable in any literal sense. Okie dokie, we are on Halacha Yud Daled. So 14th
Pardon me,
halacha.
can I ask how long have you all been into this chapter?
I would say since we first began this chapter specifically,
Mhm.
I'm gonna say maybe 4 weeks. What would you guys say? And remember, we started.
Okay, so it's still reasonable for me to basically go back and catch up on my
Oh,
own.
absolutely. This is just the
Okay,
first chapter.
awesome.
You can read it in
Okay.
English on Chabad's website.
Yeah, okay.
It takes
okay,
longer
thank you.
than normal because we're not only learning the content of, the
Right.
meaning, but we're
Yeah,
learning
right.
Hebrew and the meaning at the same time.
Right. Okay, thank you.
You bet. Yeah, so you guys, if you want to read ahead, absolutely, that's great. It would take forever if you're waiting to learn all of Mishneh Torah just through this class. That's not practical. Okie dokie. Mr. Robert Ataitano, are you with us still? Mr. Robert, you might be on mute.
He said in chat that he had to walk away.
No problem.
Yeah, I'm starting work, so I'm getting
And
set
by
up. So
no problem, no problem. If you have any questions, send in the chat. And
okay.
if any of you guys notice anything in the chat, by the way, please speak up because I'm not always noticing what's in the chat. It kind of disappears on my end. All right. Well, Rav Peter, would you like to read this?
Certainly. Yep.
Bachavod. And
What
remember,
ain
watch out for those aleph and ayns. Always separate them.
What ain lo ma'waith lo chaim kachaye haguf hachai.
All right, excellent. These kula mitzvot. All right, you know what? I want us all to read. Whenever I call on somebody to read, they're going to read it. And then after that, I want us to all read it together. That way we can all get something out of it each time instead of some of us just sort of sitting in the background. All right, so now let's read this together. You guys can repeat after me. We'en lo. Everybody say we'en lo. Lo mowath. Lo mowath. We'lo hayim.
We'lo chaim.
We'lo hayim.
We'lo chaim.
So if you see a dot in the yud, inside the yud, that means that yud is going to be pronounced as a Y sound. So not just the vowel E, but Y-E. Hayim. Hayim. We'lo hayim. Everybody say, I want to hear everybody if you can. We'lo hayim.
We'lo chaim.
Okay. Ke haye.
Okay, haye
Haguf.
haguf
Ha-hay.
hachai.
I'm going to read it all the way through one time, and you guys can read it again with me under your breath. We'en lo moath we'lo hayim kehaye haguf ha-hay. Rav Sanders, tetargem bevakasha. Tetargem bevakasha. Targem means translate.
Translate, yep. We'ain lo, there is not lo to him.
So
There's
the
not
first,
to him. Mhm.
go ahead.
There is not to him death. Lo ma'waith. We'lo chaim. There's not life, like the life
Biological,
of
like literal life, physical life.
Kachaye haguf, like the life of a body. Chachai lives.
A living body. Excellent. All right. Let's see. Andres, אתה איתנו עוד? רב אנדרס, מה איתך? סבבה. אני משער שאתה עסוק. I'm going to assume that he's busy. I think he can probably hear us though. So let's go back to Miss Heather. Would you like to read?
I'll give it a shot.
All right. Tur Shalach, your turn. Tur Shalach.
Willow.
Excellent.
Hell. Uth.
Okay, so Sich.
Sich. Luth.
You got it. Velo Sichluth.
Ulo. Hach. Ma.
Excellent. By the way, you guys, if you see a kamatz before a shava, usually that's going to mean that the shava is sounded. So if you're aiming for precise pronunciation, you could read this as chachma instead of chachma, chachma. It's a subtle difference, but don't drive yourselves crazy. Leave that to me. Okay, tamshichi, continue.
Kehach. Echma.
Chachamath, chachamath.
Chachamath. Ha. Ish.
Ish.
Hey. Hach. Kam.
All right. If anybody had any phlegm before we started reading this sentence, by the time we finish it, you should have a clear throat. So let's read it together. Everybody biyahad, all together. Wele sichluth.
Welo sichluth.
Excellent. Wele sichluth. And if you want to overcome the stereotypical English accent when you read Hebrew, be careful when you see the O vowel to not say O. So instead of reading velo, for example, in English, when we make O sounds, we tend to put sort of a W there that's not there. So most English O's, when a native English speaker reads, we tend to add a W sound after the O sound, even if the W is not in the word. So, for example, if you see OH written as a word, like an exclamation, oh no, and then you see the O in the word no, N-O. We're really pronouncing it kind of like O-W, oh, there's a what sound, oh no. In Hebrew, we don't want to do that. It's more like in Spanish, where you just do the with no wa after it. So instead of lo, you want to say lo. Drop the W. All right, biyahad together. Welo sichluth.
Welo sichluth.
Excellent. And again, dropping our W. Welo.
Willow.
Everybody say
Welo.
lo. Try to shorten that O
Lo.
sound as much as you can. You're doing that excellently. Welo.
Welo.
Chachama.
Achama.
Welo. Chachama.
Ke chachamath.
Ke chachama.
Achma.
Ha'ish.
Ish.
He
Hacham.
chacham.
Excellent. Now read it again. You guys can read under your breaths. Wala sichluth, wala chachama. Ke chachamath ha'ish hacham. All right, I'm going to translate this because I know it's going to be confusing. Wala sichluth, so neither stupidity or foolishness, nor wisdom. Ke, who can tell us what the prefix ke means?
As or like, right?
All right, Whitley. Well, let's not steal the show. Whitley.
I mean, I'm like, that's a vague memory. I don't know if it's sure. It has a
I
question
don't
mark
think
at
you
the end.
realize. I just want everybody to know that before Whitley joined us, we used to I we had Hebrew lessons several years ago, and she was advancing pretty well, but then for a number of years she told me that she didn't really use Hebrew for a long time. So she felt very anxious.
It's because I walked away from Judaism, which I'm realizing now in recent months was a very stupid decision. So,
But life is for learning. But she expressed to me like such lack of confidence and uncertainty about how her Hebrew would be. And she's still in the show. All right, so okay, so ke is a prefix in Hebrew, which means like or as. So feel free to write that down on your notepad. We should all have a notepad that we will post on the fridge or somewhere to see throughout the week. Ke attached to the beginning of a Hebrew word. You could just put K dash to represent this. Ke. It's a short form of the word kamo, means like or as. So in the same way that neither death nor biological life apply to God in any physical sense, nor does foolishness nor wisdom. Okay? God is wise, no doubt. But wisdom is not something that God possesses in the manner, ke, as the wisdom of a man who is wise. And the Rambam, Maimonides, he goes on to explain what he means by this. I will give you a short summary so that you won't think it's absolute foolishness. The wisdom of a human or of any created creature is an acquired wisdom, which means that a human's wisdom, even once he becomes wise, in some way that wisdom is distinct from his existence is on a fundamental level. It's something that's acquired and then annexed unto him that he draws from. And he acquired it from experience. God and God's wisdom are one and the same. We speak of them as two different things because of the limitations of human speech. But God and his wisdom are one and the same, and God's wisdom is not acquired. It's not something that God attained by experience. So God and his wisdom, they're utterly synonymous, which means that God's wisdom is fundamentally different from the wisdom of man. It's not just that a man can be wise and God is wise, but God's just a bit wiser than humans. It's not like that. God's wisdom is not quantitatively different from man's wisdom. God's wisdom is qualitatively different. The very nature of God's wisdom is different from the nature of man's wisdom. So the wisdom of God is not just greater than man's in the sense of amount or experience, but on a fundamental level, God's wisdom is utterly different. Okay, so again, we're not saying God is not wise, but we're saying that God is not wise in the sense that a man is wise. La shina, neither sleep, la qisa, nor awaking, la ka'as, neither anger, la sahaq, nor play, la simha, neither joy, la asluth, nor sadness. And of course, God is joyful. We read that in the Psalms. But again, as with wisdom, any of these terms, when they're applied to God, are figurative. And when we say something's figurative, we don't mean that it's meaningless. It absolutely has meaning. But the meaning is going to be of a fundamentally different nature than the meaning it has for a human. La asluth, nor sadness. La shathiqa, nor silence, la dibur, nor speech. So, وَإِذَا Adonai al-Moshe lemor, and God spoke unto Moses, saying, is the most common verse in the Bible, the most repeated verse. God doesn't speak. Ke, again, someone other than Whitley, what does ke mean? Ke prefix added to a word in Hebrew. What does ke mean? When we add the sound ke to a word, what does that mean in Hebrew? Someone hasn't written it down yet. Please write it down.
Means like or as.
Excellent. Kol hakavod. Okay, so God silence. It's not just that God is silent or isn't silent. We're saying with all these things that it's not that God is or isn't, but that they don't apply. They're completely inapplicable to God as he truly is. So neither silence nor speech. But we know that God speaks. And God spoke unto Moses, saying, speech does not apply to God. Ke, as or like the dibur, the speech of a man, human. Okay? Koch, thus, amaru hachamim, our sages said. I just realized I haven't been checking my messages Facebook to see if somebody wants to join. And no requests, so we'll continue. Everybody say bo'u namshich. Bo'u. Everybody say bo'u.
Bohu.
Bo'u namshich.
Namshich.
That's how we say. Let's continue. Bo'u namshich. En lema'ala. Neither above. La yeshiva. Neither sitting. Wala amida. Nor standing. So after saying that all these things don't apply to God, including ascension, our sages said there is not above. So then they use a metaphor to refer, because we have no other way to refer to God other than by means of figures of speech. So above there is not, neither sitting, nor standing, nor uraf, nor ipui. I forgot what araf means, to my shame. I think ipu. Let me look this up. Feel free to follow along in English if you would like. That would also help us if there's ever a word that I've forgotten. So I'm going to Chabad, Mishneh Torah.
Would that be like to tear away, to be distracted?
It could be, but I honestly don't remember this word, and I'm ashamed
Okay.
to say that, but it's the truth. I'm thinking of a word because we say kashe oref, but oref, it's the same exact word, but I don't think that's what it means here. Oref is like neck, like kashe oref, stiff-necked. But I don't, that doesn't make sense to me here.
I think it means distraction.
It could
Like-
could very well be. Are you looking at a translation, or
No.
it could be? It would be awesome and impressive if that's what it means. And even to save time, I'm looking at Chabad's translation. So also bear in mind, even if it's something different from what you're saying, you could still be right, because the Chabad translation is not, it's not the most accurate.
It's frustrating sometimes the translations are like
It's really
paraphrased.
not the most accurate. I try to be literal, and if the literal doesn't make sense, I still try to let you guys know what the literal meaning is, in addition to the way the word's being used.
I appreciate
So
that.
we are on 11. Okay. So they're translating as separation and as connection. So if that's what these mean, which would make sense contextually, if that's what these mean, they're not the most common way of saying separation and connection. The most common ways we had earlier, which are hibur and perud, right here. Hibur and perud. So these could be synonyms. To save time, we're going to move on, and I am going to highlight these so that I will double check them afterwards. And I will let you guys know in our group. Got that screenshotted to check it later. All right. Bo'u namshich. Everybody say bo'u.
Bohu?
Not bo'u, but bo'u. We need to hear a break. Bo'u.
Bo'u?
Yes. Do you feel that break? You just did it perfectly. Do you feel what you're doing there? Ooh.
I do.
Okay,
Yep.
so try to keep that feeling in mind. That's what we want to do with ayins and aleph. Make a clear break. And this is not just me being nitpicky. I do realize that I'm I'm more nitpicky on Hebrew than most people, but some of this nitpickiness is not really being nitpicky. And this is one such case. If we don't make that sound, it will be unintelligible in Hebrew in some cases. And this is one of those cases. The reason is because if you just say bo, the native Hebrew speaker doesn't know if you're saying bo, which means in him, if you're just saying that with an American accent, or if you're saying bo'u, which is y'all come. It's literally unintelligible if we don't make that separation. All right. Bo'u namshich. Let's continue. I only heard Rav Peter. Everybody else, let's hear you guys if you can speak up. Bo'u namshich.
Bo'u namshich.
Yofi. Kol hakavod. And what does that mean? Bo'u namshich. Let's continue. Let's continue. All right. Bo'u namshich. I'm gonna select a victim here. Robert is busy. Miss Whitley. Makore. Miss Whitley, are you still with us?
Okay.
Yofi. Tur shalach. Your turn. Tur shalach.
Tur shalach. Or
Yes,
tur
ma'am.
sheli,
Again.
I think.
Yep.
But I
Yeah,
don't know.
if I say tur shalach, which means your turn for a female,
Tur
then
sheli. It's my
then the
turn.
female can answer what you just said correctly. You can answer tur shali. My turn. Yalla. Tur shalach. Yalla.
All right. Weho il.
And you guys heard that break. She broke the vowel of the O from the E under the Aleph. That's what we should do.
I will confess that was not intentional, but I
Well,
was
you
trying to
did
read
it
the word,
correctly.
but it's okay. Okay.
Weho il.
Weho il. Weho il. Weha dobor.
Beautiful. Oh, you're doing the commas. Nice.
Koch. U.
Excellent.
Kol.
I want you to read it again. Weho il hadavor kochu.
Weho il. Weho il. We hadobor. Yeah, okay. Koch. Ho.
Who?
Or who, rather.
All right.
Koch.
Tamshichi. Continue. Tamshichi.
Ko. Hadeborim.
All right. Anytime you need to slowly
Hadeborim.
sound it out, excellent. Everybody should do what you just did. Anytime you slowly sound out a word, even when you're reading by yourself, if you read it accurately, but you needed to read it slowly, then say it again a few more times to increase the fluidity of the pronunciation in your mouth. There is such a thing as muscle memory. So, hadevorim, 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 hadevorim.
Kol. Hadeborim. Halolu.
Excellent. And there's a dagesh in the lamed, so you can say hallolu, hallolu.
Halolu. 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 Veho.
Patah.
Oh, yeah. Veha. Yutse.
Yoseh,
Veha.
yoseh.
Yose. Yose. Oh,
Excellent.
yose. Yeah, okay.
Yo. It's a
Toda.
herlam. Yes.
Weho. Weha. Yose.
Excellent.
Bohon. Bohin.
So that's a regular H sound, soft H like in English, like him,
Bohin.
help, her, bohen.
Bohin. Shene. Emru. Shene. Emru. Or Shene. Shene. Shene Meru.
Excellent.
Shene
Shennet meru.
Meru.
Shennet meru. Shennet meru.
Shene Meru. Shene Meru. batoro. Uv dibre, I don't know.
Uvdivre, uvdivre,
Uvi,
uv,
okay. Uv dibre,
Excellent. Excellent.
Uvdivre.
All right, you're giving a great example of how we all need to practice reading Hebrew when we're by ourselves. Excellent example.
Kebi
All right.
aim. I don't know. Oh, sorry. Okay. Ne nevi aim. Nevi aim.
So you're making an ayin sound. This is an aleph.
Okay, it's an aleph. Okay, so nevi aim.
Excellent. Excellent. Kol hakavod. All right, let's all read this together. Waha'il wahadavor. Everybody say waha'il wahadavor.
והואיל והדבר.
אני רוצה לשמוע יותר מרק את Whitley. I want to hear more than just Whitley. Everybody. מי שיכול, whoever's able. وهائل وهالدvar.
وهائل وهالدvar.
כך הוא.
כך הוא.
כל הדברים.
כל
כל
הדברים.
הדברים.
הללו. הללו.
הללו. הללו.
וכיוצא בהן.
וכיוצא בהן.
בהן.
שנאמרו. Can you hear the aleph? The sound. That's the sound of aleph. שנאמרו. שנאמרו.
שנאמרו.
רב פיטר, טור שלך.
שנאמרו.
Excellent. Excellent. שנאמרו בתורה.
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 All right, so, okay, בואו נמשיך. ובדברי נביאים. ובדברי נביאים. ובדברי נביאים.
ובדברי נביאים.
Excellent. Excellent. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and translate so that we can pick up some speed. وهائل وهدبر كخو. And since the matter is thus, كل هدبريم هللو وخيوسه بهن, all of these things, all of these matters, and whatever comes as a consequence of them, שנאמרו בתורה ובדברי נביאים, that are mentioned in the Torah and in the words of the prophets. הכל משול לישא הם. They are all, who knows what mashal means?
Parables.
Yes, it can be a parable or a metaphor. Both are correct translations. Umlisah. What is a melisah? So melisah is an idiom. So the Rambam is saying all of these expressions that we just covered, we said they don't apply to God. Waking, sleeping. We know that it says that God neither slumbers nor sleeps. But then there are other passages which seem to indicate that God's asleep or God's resting. What the heck is that? So the Rambam is saying that these are all parables, metaphors, and melisah, idioms. Kemoshen Amor, as it is stated, Yoshev Bashomayim Yishak, he who sits in the heavens laughs. Ki asuni bahavlehem, they have angered me with their emptiness. Asher sos Adonai, as the Lord rejoiced. These are different examples that Rambam's giving, specific quotes for examples, and all such similar things. Regarding all these, our sages said, the Torah spoke in the language of the sons of men. So, whether or not the Rambam was influenced by Aristotle, and for sure the Rambam was influenced by Aristotle in some way. I don't know if that can even be disputed. But at least in these concepts, when it comes to understanding these things figuratively, these anthropomorphisms figuratively, there is definitely evidence at least to some extent, that these were also the view of our sages, that they are figurative. To what extent is a different question, but the idea that they're figurative is not an innovation of the Rambam. Our sages, Hazal, stated this in many different ways. وَخَانْ هُ أُمَيْر, and thus it is stated, and likewise it is, and likewise he says, هَأُثِيهِمْ مَخْعِسِيمْ. This is from the book of Jeremiah, chapter 7, verse 19. This is in Tanakh itself. So God has described in the book of Jeremiah the people of Israel angering him. And then we get this interesting verse. But have they angered me? The ha is rhetorical. This is always a rhetorical question. You can't translate this as a definite article in this position grammatically, because you have a direct object and then you have the ha. Ha at the beginning of sentences, at the beginning of questions in classical Hebrew, is an indisputable indication of rhetorical. It's telling you this is a rhetorical question. Are they really angering me? Are they angering me? The answer is no. That's in Tanakh itself. Thus, behold, he says, Ani Adonai Leshonithi. I am the eternal. I am the transcendent one. Leshonithi. I don't change. From the book of Malachi, the book of Malachi, chapter 3, verse 6. And if it were, who knows an example where we have this word illu? Illu. You should all know this word. And I'm not asking about in Telugu where it means house. Illu. It's the only one of the few words in Telugu that I know from going to India. But what is it in modern, not modern, in Hebrew, even in ancient Hebrew? What does illu mean? We should all know this word because it's from a popular and beloved song. Illu. What does illu mean? I-L-L-U. Illu.
It means these plural.
Come again?
Oh. It means these.
Illu, illu looks a lot like that. Ellu means these.
Elu. Okay, sorry.
Yeah,
sorry.
ellu. And the u definitely indicates plural 99% of the time in Hebrew. There are a tiny, tiny handful of exceptions. This is one of them. Illu. Illu means if it were or had it been. Okay, so you guys want to write this down for your Passover song, the popular Passover song. Illu hotzianu mi Mitzrayim hotzianu dayenu. Nobody knows that song? Dayenu. Nobody knows that song? Come on, you guys.
Yes,
Somebody.
I know that song.
Okay, so the first word is this word illu. You should know what it means. It means if it were or had it been. If it were so. That's what illu means. And this is why if you look at a Hebrew book and then look at a translation of that book side by side, the Hebrew will always be substantially shorter than the English translation, because there's a lot of words in Hebrew that appear as one word, but in English it takes like a whole phrase or sentence to say. So Hebrew is very concise. And if it were that sometimes he would be angry, and sometimes sameach, happy, this would mean that he changes. But it says in the prophet, Ani Adonai lo shonithi. God says, I am the eternal. I do not change. So God is immutable. It's quite literally synonymous with who he is. He is the immutable principle. God is the unchanging reality. Everything changes but him. And all this is the elu you were talking about of Peter. You have illu here, and then you have elu here. So elu is these.
Yes.
And all these things, enom, they do not مسويين إلا لجوفيم أفليم هالشفوليم. So all of these things that we've described that do not apply to God, they only exist with the lowly bodies of creation. Everything that's created, which is lowly and humble in comparison to Hashem Yithbarach or Yit'aleh, in comparison to the blessed and exalted one, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Holy One, blessed be He. Shochene vote Homer, those who dwell in chambers of clay, Asher be'afar Yesodeh, which dust is their foundation. From the book of Job, chapter 4, verse 19. Avalhu Baruch Hu, but He, most worthy is He, Yit'aleh, is exalted with Ramam, and high above Al Kol Zeh, all these things. So we have concluded the first chapter of Yesodeh haTorah, the foundations of Torah. Next week we will begin in the second chapter. Let us finish off with the SHI'UR. Does anybody have any questions about anything we've read? Anything we've learned? This is the time to have discussion.
Well, I have a question. It's more about how can I, like, I see this website, or rather that other website, I took a screenshot of it, so I'll go to it on my own.
Okay. Machon Mamre?
Yes,
Okay.
Mamre. And then,
by the way, it has a lot of articles in English as well. A lot of good articles in English.
Okay, and then for an English copy of Mishneh Torah, I had one that I ended up gifting to someone else upon my leaving Judaism some years
All
ago.
right.
I'm wondering what would be a good you're saying a good English translation would be on this site, or because I'm wondering about a physical book too.
Yeah.
I do like physical, so
unfortunately, unlike the Bible, there's only one complete translation of Mishneh Torah, as far as I know. There might be another, possibly there could be a few others. If so, they're not widely known at all. The most readily available translation of Mishneh Torah is going to be published by a publisher called Moznaim. I will put the publisher name in our WhatsApp group so you can all see it and you'll have a record of it. That's where.
Okay, you can invite me to that group if you wish.
I already did.
Oh, okay.
It says you're already added.
Oh, okay. I haven't checked WhatsApp. Okay. And I guess that's my main thing. Just wondering how to best study Mishneh Torah, and
well, excellent. This is a very excellent question. Thank you so much for asking this, and super relevant to everybody. So let's go here. We're going to go to the main page of Machon Mamre. By the way, Machon Mamre is the website of a dear friend and teacher of mine who passed away not so long ago. And he was my first connection in the land of Israel ever. And my first mentor in the land of Israel. And he, like me, had converted, but he had converted many, I think like 40 years before I came to Israel. And he's widely respected among those who appreciate the Mishneh Torah, and even those who, well, all Orthodox Jews appreciate Mishneh Torah, even if they don't learn it. But he's widely appreciated for his scholarly work in the Mishneh Torah, which he published on his website that we have here. He has with and without vowels. What is unique about his version of Mishneh Torah, the only complete code of Jewish law, is that he published a critical version of Mishneh Torah and was constantly editing it all his life until he died. Zichronam livracha. And he published his critical work, which was based on comparing and providing the majority text of Mishneh Torah, based on the majority of manuscripts, but not majority of just any manuscripts. He based it on the majority of those manuscripts that are most widely recognized as being dependable and reliable, but not based just on one region, but all regions of Jewish communities. So he compared the most authoritative manuscripts of Mishneh Torah found in Ashkenazi communities, together with the majority manuscripts of Mishneh Torah found in Iraq, found in Yemen, found in all over the place. So his version of Mishneh Torah is one of the most accurate versions that you can find that exists. The only other major publication of Mishneh Torah that is based on accurate manuscripts that's available is the version of Rav Mori Yosef Kafeh Zatzal. Rav Yosef Kapach. He was the head of the non-Kabbalistic community of Yemenite Jews. And he still is. I mean, he passed away, but he's still widely esteemed among Yemenite Jews, even among those that do embrace Kabbalah. Not all of them. Those that are like really extreme in their obsession with Kabbalah typically loathe him. But regardless of that, he provided innumerable resources for Yemenite Jews and for all of world Jewry, of all sorts of ancient Jewish literature, very important Jewish literature, that up until his life was only accessible if you knew Judeo-Arabic. So he translated a lot of literature from Judeo-Arabic into modern Hebrew, together with commentaries. And even some works that had already been translated to Hebrew for centuries, such as Ibn Tibbon's ancient translation of the Rambam's Guide for the Perplexed, for example. Rambam's Guide for the Perplexed. That was translated in the Rambam's own lifetime, almost 1,000 years ago. But the Hebrew that he used was very, very technical, even for their time, and is even more difficult to read for modern Hebrew speakers. So Mori Yosef Kafeh translated that again into modern Hebrew. So he did amazing work. That's Rav Yosef Kafeh. And although Mori Shlomo ben Avraham, the author of this website, although his work is not as expansive and extensive as Rav Gafeh's, but his work is still massive, what he did with Mishneh Torah, and extremely impressive, considering that he converted as an adult. It's not a lot of people have done that, even Jews who have been observant Jews their whole lives. That is a lot of extra information that isn't answering your question. So how best you should do
it's
it?
helpful. Thank you.
I'm giving it because it's background. I mean, many people who join us may not understand the significance of Mishneh Torah, and they may not understand the significance of this website. So the Chabad version of Mishneh Torah that you'll find on the Chabad website, it's very useful and important because it's the only accessible English translation of Mishneh Torah online that I know of. I don't know of any other. If there is, please let me know. So that's why the Chabad version is useful. But it's also problematic because their translation is based on the Vilna edition, which is known, it's notorious for having errors. And we shouldn't not use it because of the errors. It's better to make some errors but still get the majority right than to not learn it at all because there's just a few errors in it, so we're not going to learn it. That's ridiculous. Some of the errors are pretty bad, but the majority is good, so you should definitely use the Chabad's version if you want to learn Mishneh Torah in English. Just keep in mind that if you see anything funny there, you might want to compare it to the accurate manuscripts, which unfortunately do not have an English translation. But you can talk to me or someone else who knows Hebrew, and we can confirm for you. You can use this website. So this website they have articles lots of useful articles in English that my friend Mori Shlomo ben Avraham either wrote himself or he took from some other popular Jewish website and edited it to harmonize it with Mishneh Torah. All sorts of useful topics, as you can see here. The best way to learn, if you want to really go deep, is, and I would encourage you to do that after being familiar with these articles, is you go to the Mishneh Torah. You can find it on Chabad, because we're going to look at the English. Go to their search bar, type in Mishneh Torah, Mishneh with an EH, not to be confused with the Mishnah. So it's the first thing that comes up. Here you have a table of contents. This is the entire body of Jewish law, from both Talmuds and from the Tosefta, the Sifra, and the Sifri, the Mechilta. The Rambam is the only person to codify all of Jewish law. It doesn't mean that the Rambam is indisputably correct on every single point. It doesn't mean that you're a heretic if you feel uncomfortable with or absolutely don't accept something that you read in Mishneh Torah. Doesn't mean you're a heretic. Even the Rambam wouldn't consider you a heretic for that. There are certainly places in the Gemara and the Talmud where there could legitimately be discussion about what is the correct view. But because the Rambam was creating a practical guide to Jewish law, which did not exist yet in his time, and still doesn't exist for the entire corpus of Jewish law, so he had to make decisions. So the Mishneh Torah is reflective of his decision. When there's more than one opinion in the Gemara, he decides, this is the opinion that makes sense to me, I'm bringing that. Even if we may not agree with some point, but it's indisputable in the Jewish world. All camps of the religious Jewish world, even of the secular Jewish world, it's not disputed the value of this work that he put together. So this is the table of contents. He begins it with basically a short history of the Jewish people and of the giving of Torah. Then he gives you a list of all 613 mitzvot. So he wants us to be familiar with all 613 mitzvot, even if it's just a cursory familiarity. So here you have each and every mitzvah and a verse it comes from of all 613 mitzvot.
That's the that one, that's the translation. That's what I had before.
Okay.
That book there.
Oh, awesome.
Is that a good one to get again? That book that was there?
If you want to get the book, this right here is actually part of the Mishneh Torah. So it should be in the first book of Mishneh Torah. You should have that list. And this should not be confused with what's called Sefer HaMitzvot, the Book of Commandments. The Rambam wrote two lists of the 613 mitzvot. He wrote this list, which is in the Mishneh Torah itself, at the very beginning. And these are simple enumerations. It's a simple listing of all 613 mitzvot. This is Mishneh Torah.
There.
This is different from Sefer HaMitzvot, which I'm going to pull up for you now. You might be referring to Sefer HaMitzvot, where he lists, again, all 613 mitzvot. But the difference is, in this other book, which is not Mishneh Torah, here he lists all 613 mitzvot, but in a little bit more of an elaborated form. He devotes a few paragraphs to each one. So this is different. It's the same commandments, the same listing, but they're not short. They're not abbreviated. Sometimes they're like 5 or 6 paragraphs. So I don't know which one you have.
Maybe I'll send you a link. I don't know if you see the book that keeps coming up each time that you're scrolling through.
I don't. Are you talking about this book right here?
I don't know if it's that one. If you back up a couple of times, I'll be able to point it out to you. If you click on the 613 mitzvot. Sorry, I don't know if I'm taking over your class here.
It's okay.
Sorry, guys, I'm used to like a more one-on-one dialogue with you. So
we only have 2 other people remaining. And if they want to speak up, they should definitely feel free to speak up.
Well, oh, I'm sorry. It says the 613 mitzvot towards the top.
So I don't see that. Tell me if I should
Oh, if
keep
you can
going up.
scroll up, it's
Oh,
the
scroll.
two
Okay.
that you, so that what you, under introductions,
Right
what you
here?
clicked on. Uh-huh.
Okay.
I saw the book on this page. You can go to positive commandments.
This one?
Oh, there, yes. So
Okay.
would that be a good, that's the one I had.
Okay, so that is Mishneh Torah. This is
Okay.
the only widely available English translation of Mishneh.
Okay, awesome. That's the one I had. So I can get that and then compare it to my online study of the Hebrew.
Yeah,
Okay,
absolutely.
thank you so much.
You bet. Does anybody else have any questions? All right, so I'm going to finish off with saying what we're learning right now is the first book of Mishneh Torah, the foundations of Torah. I encourage everybody to also learn on the Chabad website. You can read it in English. Talmud Torah, Teshuvah, and these three here, if you want to write it down. I would give these priority for learning. So Talmud Torah, Teshuvah, Tefillah, which is the laws of prayer, and Barachot, the laws of blessings. And of course, you should feel free to learn whatever you want here, but that's really what I encourage people to learn.
I'm sorry, under Sefer Ahava, you said these three. So are you referring to?
Yeah, at first I was going to say Shema, and then I changed my mind because it's not critical for women to learn unless they want to voluntarily take it upon themselves, which is praiseworthy and good to do. If they've
Yeah, I
already,
used to learn that one.
but it's really something that a woman should not be doing if they're not yet familiar with all of their obligations.
Mm.
It's praiseworthy for women to do it, but a person, whether male or female, should first learn all of their obligations. And Shema is not an obligation on women. The same way that Nida is not an obligation on men, right? Some things are not the same between men and women. Now, if someone is somewhere in the middle of male and female due to some kind of developmental, atypical development, then that's a whole nother question. But men and women in general, they have some distinct obligations, and we should all become familiar with our own obligations first. But
So
tefillah, the
that's the
blessings,
tefillah
yeah,
and berachot.
yes,
Okay.
ma'am. All right, you guys, we're gonna end this with our prayer. Say after me. Let's say it all together. Modeh ani lefanecha,
Ani lefanecha,
Adonai Elohai.
Adonai.
I am grateful before you, O eternal my God. She samta helqi mi yosheve beth hamidrash. Let's say it out loud together. She samta helqi
Samta helqi
mi yosheve
mi yosheve
beth hamidrash.
bet hamidrash.
I am grateful before you, O eternal my God, that you have placed my portion among those who dwell in the house of study. وَلَا samta helqi,
ולא שמתו חלקי,
and you have not placed my portion, mi yoshevet karonef,
מיושבי קרונות,
and you have not placed my portion among those who sit around idly. She'ani mashkim, she'ani mashkim,
שאני משכים,
והם mashkimim,
והם משכינים.
for I rise up early and they rise up early. Ani mashkim ledivre Torah.
אני משכים לדברי תורו.
I rise up early unto words of Torah. Wehem mashkimim.
והם משכינים, קימים.
And they rise up early. Lidvorim batalim. They rise up early to empty things.
לדבורים בטלים.
And they rise up early to empty things. Ani amel. Wehem amelim.
אני עמל והם עמלים.
I'm sorry. I love that letter.
Oh my goodness, my frustration with myself. I don't know if you've forgotten that. But
أني عمال وهم عمالين. I
أني
toil and they
عمال
toil.
وهم عملين.
أني عمال مقبل الصخور.
أني عمال مقبل صخور.
I work hard and receive reward. وهم عملين وإن مقبلين صخور.
وهم عملين وإن
مقبلين صخور.
مقبلين صخور.
They also work hard, but they do not receive their reward. أني رص وهم رصين.
أني روح وهم رصين.
I run and they run. أني رص لحيي هعلام هبا.
أني روح لهاي هعلم هبا.
علام هبا.
هعلم هبا.
I run unto life of the world to come. وهم رصين لبئر شاحث.
وهم رصين
leave
leave.
إر شاحث.
Yeah, thank you for the leave Ed Shaha.
And
Yeah,
they are
Shaha.
running unto a pit of destruction. Yehi ratzon min lefonecha, may it be your will before you, Adonai Elohai, Melech ha'olam. May it be your will, O eternal, our God, King of all existence, that we walk in your ways, that we pattern our lives and our actions and our thoughts according to your ways. Just as you had patience with us and compassion on us, may we have compassion on others. Just as you lifted us up from the path of destruction unto the path of life, may we be your agents in this world, agents of your love and compassion and patience, lifting up others also from the path of destruction and guiding them to the path of life, with mercy, with understanding, and with patience. May we be forgiving as you are forgiving. May we be speedy to hear the cries of others and to control our anger, to do justice, as you have been fair and compassionate to us. And may we all have a pleasant and meaningful and restful Shabbat. Lema'an shemecha, for the sake of your name. Hin yehi ratzon ve'imru amen.
Amen.
Everybody says amen. All right, everybody. Sheyeh lechem Shabbat shalom. You have a great Shabbat. Miss Heather, Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
All right. If you guys have any questions, please post them in the WhatsApp group. If you have any comments, because I do know that yours truly is quite verbose. So, so if you feel like that I need to focus on something or do something different, feel free to make comments. If you're uncomfortable writing it in the WhatsApp group, text me directly. It's fine. Don't be ashamed. God's blessings be upon you. Shabbat shalom.